At exactly 03:17 hours on May 6, 2026, in the pitch-black throat of the world's most dangerous waterway, the USS Jason Dunham was doing 28 knots through water that no American destroyer had dared to transit in over 60 days, the Strait of Hormuz. 39 kilometers wide at its narrowest choke point, a corridor of sand, salt, and sunken ambitions, where 1/5 of the world's entire petroleum supply once flowed every single day. It had not flowed freely since February 28th, the night the United States and Israel dropped nearly 900 precision strikes on Iran in under 12 hours, and turned the Middle East into a continental powder keg. Now, inside that bottleneck, 3 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers were moving in tight tactical formation: the USS Jason Dunham, the USS Paul Hamilton, and the USS Gravely. Their mission, classified under the codename Project Freedom, was brutally simple on paper: escort 2 American-flagged merchant vessels through the strait and prove to the world that the U.S. Navy owned this water. In practice, it was anything but simple. Because lurking on the northern coastline, buried inside the rocky inlets of Qeshm Island, Iran's 1,491 square kilometer strategic fortress at the entrance to the strait, were the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy's most lethal and most fanatical operators. Men who had been given a single order from Tehran: make America bleed in the strait. What unfolded over the next 97 minutes would mark the most intense US-Iran naval engagement since the tanker war of the 1980s. It would bring the world's oil markets to their knees, force the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to a live Pentagon press conference at 2 a.m., and drag both nations back to the absolute razor's edge of all-out war. All while a fragile, barely breathing ceasefire hung by a single thread over the Persian Gulf. This is what actually happened. And the full picture is far more dangerous than anything the White House or Tehran will officially admit. The first indication was not a visual, it was acoustic. Deep in the Combat Information Center of the USS Jason Dunham, the AN/SQS-53C hull-mounted sonar suite began registering anomalous cavitation signatures, the telltale churning of multiple high-revving outboard engines at close range, running without lights. The petty officer on watch flagged the contact immediately. The tactical display on the Aegis Combat System showed 11, then 14, then 17 fast-moving surface tracks emerging from a cove on the northeastern edge of Qeshm Island, fanning outward in a classic encirclement pattern at speeds exceeding 45 knots. 17 IRGC Boghammer and Ashura-class fast attack craft, each one armed with rocket-propelled grenades, DSHK 12.7mm heavy machine guns, and C-802 anti-ship missile launch rails. Each one crewed by men who had spent the past 67 days waiting for exactly this moment. The IRGC commander had timed it with surgical precision. The 3 destroyers were at their most vulnerable, committed to the narrow channel, flanked by Iranian territorial waters to the north and the Omani coastline to the south, with the 2 civilian merchant vessels sandwiched in the middle of the formation. Any aggressive maneuver risked a collision. Any hesitation gave the fast boats a closing window measured not in minutes, but in seconds. Simultaneously, on the Link 16 tactical data network shared across all 3 destroyers and the E-2D Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft circling at 25,000 feet to the south, a second contact bloomed, this one airborne. The Hawkeye's AN/APY-9 radar had just detected multiple subsonic cruise missile launch signatures from the Iranian coastal belt near Bandar Kamir, 28 nautical miles to the northeast. The fire control system's friend or foe interrogation returned a chilling result. No transponder. No IFF. Weapons free. The trap had been set for weeks. Iran had simply been waiting for the moment the Americans were deep enough inside the strait that retreat was as dangerous as advance. Captain Rene Castillo, commanding officer of the USS Jason Dunham, had 11 seconds to make a decision that would reverberate across every oil market, every diplomatic back channel, and every naval war college on Earth. The Mk-15 Phalanx close-in weapon system on the Dunham's forward mount spun up to its operational rate of 4,500 rounds per minute, with a sound that sailors describe as a mechanical shriek from the future, a hydraulic banshee that means something is already inside the wire. The system's own radar had acquired the lead cruise missile at 4.2 nautical miles. At Mach 0.9, the weapon had 27 seconds to impact. The Phalanx engaged at 1,500 meters. The 20mm tungsten rounds met the incoming Noor anti-ship missile, Iran's domestically produced derivative of the Chinese C-802, in a burst of kinetic energy that detonated the warhead 800 meters off the port beam of the Paul Hamilton, close enough to shower the destroyer's deck with burning shrapnel fragments and knock 2 sailors off their feet. There was no time to assess the damage. At the same time, the Paul Hamilton's Mk-41 vertical launch system began cycling. 4 RIM-162 evolved Sea Sparrow missiles erupted from their canisters in rapid succession, their rocket plumes painting the night sky in white fire. 2 additional Noor missiles, tracking the thermal signature of the merchant vessels, were intercepted at 3.1 and 2.7 nautical miles respectively. The explosions lit up the strait like a strobe light, casting grotesque orange shadows across the black water. But the fast boats were not stopping. 17 IRGC craft split into 3 attack groups with practiced discipline. The first group of 6 angled directly toward the lead merchant vessel, a bulk carrier operating under US flag. The second group of 7 peeled wide to engage the trailing destroyer, the USS Gravely, attempting to force it off course and break the formation. The third group, 4 craft, went directly for the Dunham herself, accelerating to maximum speed, their crews knowing that closing the range eliminated the destroyer's kinetic intercept advantage. The Gravely's crew responded with its Mk-38 Mod 2 25mm autocannon chain gun, raking the surface with tracer fire at a cyclic rate of 180 rounds per minute. 2 IRGC fast boats were hit within the first 45 seconds of engagement. One exploded as its fuel tank ruptured and detonated the RPG warheads stored in its bow. The second craft veered hard right, its hull holed below the waterline, and began to sink. 15 boats remained operational. Then the sky cracked open from the north. A salvo of 107mm unguided artillery rockets, the Iranian military's version of suppression fire, meant not to aim but to saturate, began impacting the water in a walking pattern toward the formation from batteries concealed in the rocky escarpments of Kesham's northern shore. This was not precision. This was psychological. A rain of steel to force the destroyers into evasive maneuvers, slowing their speed, breaking their defensive formation, opening gaps in their mutual coverage zones. In the Combat Information Center of the Jason Dunham, the tactical picture was beginning to look catastrophic. The Aegis Combat System was tracking 34 separate threat contacts simultaneously. Fast boats, airborne missiles, rocket splash patterns, and a new, deeply alarming contact, a passive sonar signature 1,400 meters off the starboard bow of the Gravely, consistent with the acoustic fingerprint of a Ghadir-class midget submarine. Iran had deployed its Ghadir boats, 120-ton vessels capable of firing 2 heavyweight torpedoes in the shallow, mine-infested waters of the northern Persian Gulf, and one of them had been holding position on the seafloor since 0100 hours, waiting. The Gravely's sonobuoys confirmed the contact. Bearing 047, range 1,400 meters. The torpedo tube outer door was open. Captain Castillo received the flash report and made the second decision that would define the battle. She ordered the USS Paul Hamilton to break from the merchant escort formation and execute a maximum speed intercept toward the submarine contact, while simultaneously requesting immediate close air support from the carrier air wing holding station 80 miles to the south aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford. Two F/A-18F Super Hornets of Strike Fighter Squadron V FA-213 Black Lions were already airborne, holding a combat air patrol at 18,000 feet. They had been up there since midnight, waiting. Their pilots had seen the engagement light up the strait on their FLIR sensors and were already running intercept geometry on Keshem Island's northern battery positions before the request reached them. The lead Hornet, callsign Iron 51, rolled inverted and dove from 18,000 feet, pulling 6 Gs through the turn, the pilot's vision tunneling gray at the edges as the aircraft screamed toward the Iranian coast at 600 knots. At 4 miles from the target, Iron 51 released a single GBU-38 500-pound JDM, guided by GPS coordinates fed directly from the Dunham's fire control system. The weapon impacted the Keshem artillery battery in 31 seconds. The secondary explosions from the ammunition stores visible from 15 miles at sea. The second Hornet, Iron 52, prosecuted the Ghadir submarine contact using AMK-54 lightweight torpedo dropped from 200 feet. The weapon entered the water 400 meters ahead of the submarine's projected course, its seeker acquiring the contact in 8 seconds. The Ghadir commander crash dove, going to maximum depth in a body of water that was only 28 meters deep. There is no hiding from a guided weapon in 28 meters of water. The explosion sent a geyser of white water 40 feet into the air, and the submarine's pressure hull failed catastrophically. It never surfaced. By 03:28 hours, 11 of the original 17 IRGC fast boats had been destroyed, disabled, or forced to withdraw. The remaining 6 disengaged at high speed toward Keshem's protected harbors, where American rules of engagement and the paper-thin ceasefire prevented pursuit. Both merchant vessels had transited the critical narrow point of the strait. Both were intact. The battle, on paper, was over in 11 minutes. But the real crisis was only beginning. 170 nautical miles to the west, the United Arab Emirates was under attack. The Emirati Integrated Air Defense System, a layered architecture of Patriot PAC-3 batteries, THAAD interceptor units provided by the United States, and domestically operated Pantsir S-1 short-range point defense guns, had been at threat condition amber since midnight. At 03:41 hours, it elevated to red as 4 Iranian Shahed 136 loitering munitions and 3 Quds-1 cruise missiles appeared simultaneously on Emirati radar, inbound toward the Fujairah Petroleum Industrial Zone, one of the largest bunkering hubs in the world and a critical node in the global shipping fuel supply chain. The Emirati Patriot batteries engaged. 3 of the 7 Iranian weapons were intercepted at altitude. 1 Shahed 136 defeated the intercept and dove into the Fujairah fuel storage compound at 03:44 hours, detonating a 40-kilogram warhead that triggered a catastrophic fire in 2 adjacent storage tanks containing 120,000 barrels of aviation fuel. The explosion was visible from 60 kilometers. The fireball climbed to 4,000 feet. 3 workers were killed instantly. 9 more suffered severe burns. A second cruise missile, the one weapon that had slipped past Emirati air defenses entirely, struck a pierside bunkering vessel in Fujairah harbor. The MV Hannah Star, a 3,200-ton bunker tanker, capsized and sank in 14 minutes, taking 4 of its crew to the bottom of the harbor. At the same moment in Tehran, Iranian state television was broadcasting footage of the Strait of Hormuz engagement, not as a defeat, but as proof of Iranian resolve. The IRGC's media arm released infrared video, recorded by reconnaissance drones circling at altitude above the battle, showing the fast boat attack from the Iranian perspective. The footage was selectively edited. It did not show the 11 craft destroyed. It showed only the 1 shrapnel burst near the Paul Hamilton. The caption read, in Farsi, "The Persian Gulf is our hunting ground." In Washington, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, was on the phone to CENTCOM at 0350 hours Eastern Time, just minutes after the Fujairah strike, listening to a damage assessment that was getting worse by the sentence. Here is what the public does not know. Here is the layer of this story that makes every other element more dangerous. 48 hours before the Strait of Hormuz engagement, US Naval Intelligence, through signals intercepts processed by NSA's Special Collections Service, operating from assets inside the Gulf region, had detected encrypted communications between the IRGC Navy's Hormuz garrison commander and a senior officer at Bandar Abbas Naval Station. The intercept, partially decoded, indicated a pre-positioned ordnance cache on the seabed of the northern strait. Magnetic influence bottom mines, specifically the SADAF series, Iran's domestically produced contact and influence mine based on Soviet MRAB architecture. Each mine carries a 230-kilogram explosive charge capable of breaking the keel of a Burke-class destroyer. The intel was assessed as moderate confidence. It was flagged to CENTCOM. The decision was made to proceed with Project Freedom anyway, on the calculated bet that the IRGC would prioritize the fast boat ambush over activating the minefield, fearing that any ship sunk in the narrow channel would block their own exit routes. That calculation was correct, by 400 meters. Post-engagement mine clearance operations, conducted by MH-53E Sea Dragon helicopters from the USS Baton's Amphibious Readiness Group, deploying the AN/AQS-24B mine hunting system, discovered 22 live SADAF mines laid in a chevron pattern across the northern transit lane, the exact lane the three destroyers had used at 0317 hours. 22 mines. The Jason Dunham, the Paul Hamilton, and the Gravely had transited through them at 28 knots in darkness. Not one triggered. The reason? The IRGC had pre-armed the mines to activate at 0400 hours, after the American formation was expected to be in the Central Channel, the deepest, most inescapable section of the strait. The fast boat ambush, the rocket barrage, the cruise missile salvo, all of it was a herding operation. Drive the formation into the minefield, sink a destroyer in the channel, seal the strait permanently, and hold the global economy hostage with 6,000 tons of sinking American steel. The entire operation failed because Captain Castillo accelerated her formation to 28 knots instead of the standard 18-knot transit speed. Speed saved 3 ships and 900 American lives. But there was one more element of this battle that did not appear in any Pentagon press release, any White House briefing, or any Department of Defense official statement. At 0512 hours, a SEAL Team 6 element, 8 operators inserted via CRRC combat rubber raiding craft from a submerged Virginia-class submarine, the USS Vermont, 3 nautical miles offshore, reached the rocky coastline of Ketchum Island's western peninsula. Their objective? A hardened, camouflaged IRGC command node, identified by signals intelligence as the primary coordination hub for the fast boat ambush operation. The node contained communications equipment, an encrypted tactical operations center, and, most critically, the triggering device for the mine activation system, which IRGC commanders could override and detonate remotely if the auto-arm timer was somehow defeated. The SEAL element moved inland 400 meters through broken terrain under night vision. They reached the outer perimeter of the facility at 0531 hours. What happened next is still classified at the top secret SCI level. But what leaks from people who know tell us is this. The element encountered a larger than expected IRGC security force. A firefight erupted. It lasted 9 minutes. At 0540 hours, the facility's communications array went dark, a signature consistent with either demolition or a thermobaric breaching charge detonated at close range inside a hardened structure. At 0543 hours, USS Vermont received an extraction request on the prearranged frequency. At 0547 hours, the extraction was complete. All 8 operators returned to the submarine. One had a through-and-through gunshot wound to the left thigh. He was stabilized aboard the Vermont's medical bay by a special amphibious reconnaissance corpsman within 4 minutes of extraction. The IRGC command node on Kesham Island never broadcast another signal. Whether the mine-triggering device was destroyed, captured, or simply left irrelevant by the minefield's own auto-arm failure is unknown. What is known is that 22 live SADAF mines sat inert on the seafloor of the Strait of Hormuz until US Navy EOD divers from the Baton's clearance team neutralized every single one of them over the following 36 hours.